Mark, hey, how are you? Thank you so much for joining our podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Shabri. Great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, my pleasure. I really enjoyed the Future of the SDR webinar that you kindly invited me to a couple of weeks ago, and I just thought we had to get you on here and get you sharing your insights and your point of view with what's going on with the SDR role, but also more broadly in the go to market space right now. So thanks for joining. For those people who don't know you, Mark, it would be great if you could share a little bit more about your journey and how you've ended up founding or co-founding RevvedUp.
Yeah, of course. Would love to share a little bit about that. So, I've been working in commercial go-to-market teams my whole career, which is now around 17 years, of which 15 of those have been in leadership positions. I was lucky enough to be promoted into a P&L ownership position very early on in my career, managing a team of 12 people across both sales and marketing. And that theme has been pretty consistent throughout my career, whereby I've done both sales and marketing in an almost equal amount, which is relatively unusual for someone who wound up in the chief revenue officer position. So a couple of quick career highlights that kind of inform my journey towards RevvedUp. I was pretty early on the ground with Eventbrite in the UK and Ireland, where I was their head of growth. At that time, there was relatively few people. Most people didn't know who Eventbrite were, and I really orchestrated their inbound marketing program. So thinking a lot about content marketing, SEO, partnerships, organic social events, really anything that wasn't kind of PPC or paid acquisition. Really enjoyed that. Spent 3 years at Eventbrite, and ultimately was so successful that we exported the model that I built in the UK back out to the US and globally. And that really taught me the power of great content to inform and educate and drive inbound leads to an organization. I then moved on to a really early stage business at the time called Attest. I was one of their first sort of 10, 12 employees. They were pre-revenue and really helped them architect their go-to-market model, actually sold their first subscriptions and ultimately became their chief revenue officer, helping them go on their early stage growth journey for those first 3 years. By the time I left, we had a team of, I think it was 32 people across sales and marketing, SDRs, the RevOps function, and customer success. So that taught me a lot about all those different functions and how to build things from scratch. From there, I went into a later stage bootstrap business called Student Beans, now rebranded as Peon. Helped them double their revenue over a couple of years. They were already at 8 figures in revenue when I joined, and that really helped me learn about managing globally distributed teams. It was during COVID that I joined, and I think my team was around 80 or so people strong, grew to over 100 people during my tenure there. So again, that taught me a lot about the importance of scaling a team, of communication, of setting down playbooks and systems and processes that work not just locally but globally. And then subsequent to that, I've done coaching, consulting, fractional work with a number of different UK startups before leading on to found RevvedUp, which I can say a little bit more about. But hopefully that gives you an understanding of my journey in go to market.
You've had such an amazing journey, and whilst I feel like I've known you for a few years, Mark, I think we crossed paths when you were at a test. I haven't really heard that full story before, so that's great. So thank you for sharing, and I think you're totally right. I think you're in quite a unique position of having, I don't know many revenue leaders like yourself that have spent the same amount of time in sales and marketing. They've usually been like that as opposed to together like you have. So I'm really keen to get into that in a bit more detail. So I'd love to understand a little bit more about how your background and experience and some of the challenges that you've seen along the way have led you to start up RevvedUp, and what challenges are you trying to solve for other revenue leaders?
For sure. So I think there's two answers to that. So the first one is that during certainly that journey from Eventbrite through to current day, one pattern that I've seen across the most high performing individuals and teams is this ability to create really resonant content. And resonant content is content that connects with a buyer or a potential buyer. It informs them, it drives action. It really earns you as an individual and company their trust and credibility and their attention, right? So top individuals, like the greatest SDRs, the best AEs, the best marketers, have this natural inclination or this natural ability to create resonant content on a consistent basis. But what I've also seen is they are the top few percent in any organization, and organizations find it very, very difficult to scale that innate ability in individuals across a whole organization, which means the majority of content that's created, whether from a sales or a marketing perspective, often doesn't resonate. It kind of misses the mark. It doesn't inform, it doesn't grab attention, it doesn't drive action. And so what I found was very interesting as I looked back at a lot of those patterns is, if you speak to other go-to-market leaders, other CROs, heads of SDR functions, and so on, and you say, look, how important is the ability to create good content in driving pipeline and revenue? You'll generally get 99 out of 100 people saying, yeah, it's really, really important. And then you ask the same set of people, well, how strong is your capability in the team at doing that consistently? And you tend to get a completely different answer, right? 1 out of 100 might say, yeah, we're very, very confident in our ability to consistently create this. So there's this huge delta or this huge gap between an acknowledgement and an understanding that creating really great content is an important driver of efficient and effective revenue growth and a team's ability to do it. So that's kind of the main problem that we're looking to solve with RevvedUp, and that's what led to the founding of it. The second piece is this unbelievable complexity that's emerged in the go-to-market data stack, or sorry, just the go-to-market tech stack. It's really complex, and it's quite hard within the complexity of all the tools and technologies that are being utilized across go-to-market teams to pull a singular thread from what are the key signals that we need to pay attention to on the one side of your go-to-market, and how do we pull that thread consistently into all of our distribution channels. So think email, LinkedIn, adverts, landing pages, like all that collateral that would sit on the right-hand side of getting your message out. How do we unify that message from all those different signals, create really great content, and then push it out in a consistent way across all of those different distribution channels, so you're always up to date with your message and it's always consistent, as well as being resonant. That's the second challenge that we're looking to solve with RevvedUp.
That's great. And I'm thinking back to when I was a rep, and I was, as you were talking through that, I was thinking, where was this tool back then? Because I think, one of the things that stood out to me that you said was, the content doesn't grab attention. And I remember when I started as an SDR, I was sent all these product brochures, and I was told that when someone asked for more information, which is the classic objection, just attach that as a PDF, and it was very about us, and it was very product centric, and it wasn't very value led, and it didn't necessarily build that trust and credibility you talked about. So I'm sure that so many reps are going through that same challenge. But you talked a lot about good content. Is there like an industry definition of what good content is? Because I imagine it has quite a lot of subjectivity to it. But in your opinion, how do you define good content?
Yeah, I mean, look, there is an awful lot of subjectivity to this, and ultimately with good content, or let's say effective content, there is something around beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Yeah. But I think for me, there's a few key things that will make it much more likely for it to be effective content. So the first thing is, it needs to be personalized, but more important than personalization is that it is positioned in the right way. It's, i.e., it's relevant, right? That's probably the easiest place to start. So I think there's a lot of mistakes made with thinking that in order to connect with buyers, you need to personalize content and outreach, when actually what you need to do is ensure it's relevant. And so a lot of people fall at the first hurdle. And an example might be, you're buying a gift for your partner on their birthday, and they have, I don't know, zero interest in cooking, let's say, and you buy them a set of knives or a saucepan that's personalized, right? They've got their name engraved on it. Wonderful, right? It's personalized, but they couldn't care less. And actually what it's telling them is you don't know much about them, right? You don't understand what's important to them. So the personalization isn't actually the most important factor. But if they were really into running and that's their hobby, buying them a non-personalized set of pair of amazing running shoes is thoughtful, and that would resonate with them. So relevance always trumps personalization in my mind. So the first thing is make sure it's relevant and tailored to them. The second piece is timeliness. Now, timeliness is improving in terms of how we can do that as go-to-market teams with the approach or repopularization, let's say, of signal-based selling. So signals will hopefully tell you that someone's more in market or more inclined to respond to a particular message at a given time. But timeliness certainly is an important point or part of building resonant content. I think another piece is insightfulness. So are you adding value in that communication? Are you teaching them something new? Are you adding value in some way? And I think a really interesting observation I've had is that newsletters are more popular than ever, right? You look at the growth of Substack, and there's few of the newsletter platforms whose name now escape me. They're going through the roof because everyone wants to be well educated, right? The world's changing at an incredibly rapid pace. And so people want to be informed. If you could just do that as an SDR rep, if you could actually help inform people and educate people with your content, then that's going to be incredibly useful. A fourth criteria would be that it needs to be consistent across your channels. So I'm sure you've seen this yourself, and I certainly come across it all the time, which is you've got content on a landing page, on a home page, which is fundamentally a different message to the types of content that's been sent out by SDRs, which is potentially a completely different one than is being presented when you get on your disco call by an AE, and everything's just unsynced, which honestly just creates chaos within the prospect's mind, because they don't know what is the truth of this proposition. And then finally, does it actually drive action, right? That's your ultimate arbiter. Has this been great content? Has it got them to respond to your email? Have they clicked on a link? Have they booked a meeting with you? Have they come back with follow-up steps? Have they shared it with someone? That's the ultimate arbiter of whether this is great content. So quite a bit of depth, but those are the key things that I think about when I'm looking at whether content's really good or not.
That's super helpful. I think the way that you've broken that down, I think people probably do one or two of those things. I think your example about personalization was so simple yet so effective, because you're right. An email could be like highly personalized to me, but it might not talk to any of the challenges that I'm currently facing, and personalization isn't going to get you the whole way. But I think, unfortunately, there's been some tools in the tech stack over the last 5 years that I think have been branded around personalization at scale, which I think is a little bit of an oxymoron, because I don't think you can personalize at scale. But I think that's not the way that we can do things anymore. And I think they encouraged like a spray and pray approach, and I think that has probably killed the effectiveness of a lot of outbound that teams have been doing. But I'm keen to pick up on something else you mentioned. You talked about the fact that the GTM stack has a lot of complexity around it right now. What do you think that complexity is down to, and what do you think companies can do to streamline their stack in a bit more detail?
Yeah, it's what's it down to? So I think it's down to a few things. The market's huge, right? So if you are a new startup or you want to um, move into so I think there's a number of different founders that I speak to who have started trying to sell their solution in one industry, and then they've gone, "Ooh, it could be applicable in sales and marketing." That feels like an easier easier route to get to money, because we can then try and put an ROI figure on it a bit more concretely. So I think on the one hand, there's a lot more people launching into the space because it is a big market and it feels lucrative. Of course, during the era of sort of zero interest rates, the ZERP era, there was a lot more capital, so just fundamentally a lot more startups. And actually, I think we're not unique in the fact that there is so much competition in the go-to-market stack. I think it's true in almost every other
Yeah.
verticalized or horizontal SaaS space. There's 10x more competition than there was maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. I do think that there's been a number of significant valuations in the space, so multiple unicorns, which A, attracts more investment and therefore more competitors, but B, it also means some of the big players, they're having to grow into their valuations, which means they have to find more top line growth. And what they're typically doing is trying to do that by adding more adjacent features or products which bump into their competitors. So there's a
Mm.
lot less distinctness in go-to-market than there once was. Everyone's kind of elbow into each of the spaces. And actually, I was speaking to a go-to-market leader last week, and they were trying to evaluate for a couple of new tools in their tech stack, and they were pretty much literally head in hands going, this has made it so hard for them, because
Yeah.
they used to be a best in class player in each sort of major segment, and you could name them quite easily. And that's to an extent still true. They're all still best in class in their own original, their own original playgrounds, let's say. But as they've moved into and released features into each other's back gardens, now the CFO in his organization is essentially saying, well, I can't possibly let you sign off on 2 or 3 tools that are best in
Yeah.
class. That's ridiculous. Buy one, but he knows that one isn't as good at doing everything. So it's just created this real complexity and conundrum. So that's the sort of several reasons why the state of play is where it's at. I think, how do people refine or improve the tech stack? It's a really good question. Ironically, I'm starting to see some tools whose name honestly escapes me that are trying to do this directly, i.e., they will come in and they will evaluate all of your tech stack and tell you which tools are overlapping and which are best in class and which ones you can
Oh,
get rid
wow.
of, and those types of things. I think the it's not a silver bullet, but the pragmatic way that you need to do it, and that a CFO will typically do it, is they will go into the tech stack and they will say, right, how many of these tools are actually being used to their
Mm.
capacity? Okay, this one is honestly only being used 30% of the time or by 30% of the team. That's gone, right? So that's step one. Are they actually being used? Step two is, are they delivering on their promise, right? What was the ROI meant to be? And is it delivering against that business case? And if it isn't, then again, that's gone. So I think you can start to clear out house relatively quickly. And
Yeah.
then the final piece is just making sure that they do all work together and complement each other. And if you're going to do that, there needs to be either very, very easy integration, or you need to invest in your RevOps function, which is typically massively underinvested in. And therefore, most of these tools wind up in silos. One's bought by sales, one's bought by marketing, one's bought by the BR team leader, and they don't really speak to each other. They don't really complement each other. So I think there just needs to be a wholesale strategic review of the tech stack done by companies in order to be able to streamline things and and actually get value out of them.
Yeah, I think if there's a company out there that's helping do an audit of that, I think that's always, helpful to get an external perspective. But I think, right now we're not in a stage where companies can really afford to have tools that they're not using, or they're not using properly, or they're using some functionality, or things like that. So I think it's actually a good time to take stock of what you have. I think it's a shame if the tool wasn't rolled out properly and could be adding value, but is just down to adoption and onboarding. But that's a separate issue.
I think
One thing that's coming up from a lot of people is, sorry,
Shabri,
yeah,
sorry, do you mind if I just add one other quick point to that, because it's an observation I've had as we are going to market, and I think we've talked just briefly now around the centralized idea of the complex tech stack, but it's a nightmare for reps as well, right? Reps hate the switching cost of having to go from different tab to different tab to different tab. And I think a lot of vendors have tried to optimize for owning the rep's attention, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where they feel that there is the most value to their business. But actually what it creates is this unbelievable switching cost, and reps just do not want to learn yet another tool, right? They just want to get on with their job and let the tools get out of the way. And so I think, and this is the approach we're taking at RevvedUp, which is why I thought it might be pertinent, is we don't want or need the reps to have yet another tab open. We don't need to be the second, third, fourth tab. What we're looking to do is be more of an infrastructure layer that sits under the hood of your existing tools and complements and augments them, and you get more out of them. And I think if more tools honestly took that approach, their usage would go up fivefold, tenfold, because at the moment they're almost all reliant on a rep to open it and use it to drive the usage, which reps just aren't willing to do. So I think that's just a pretty important point, maybe to make to other vendors in the space. It's not all about owning a rep's attention. It's actually about providing value. And if that means doing it under the hood, then that's still a win for you and for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important, right? You don't need to be the hero. You can be the unsung hero. You don't need to be, the best tool in the tech stack. But I think if you can help and automate and enable even 5% of the rep's day, then that's a huge win. And I think that goes back to the ROI that you're going to be able to prove to RevOps, CFO, whoever that might be. I wanted to get your opinion, Mark, on how AI is being used in some of these tools, and how AI I don't believe, and we talked about this on the webinar you hosted, I don't believe that AI is going to take over the SDR role, because I just think that you are going to completely lose that human touch, that connection, that trust, that capability. But I think there is an opportunity for AI to streamline and act as enabler. What's your view on that? And what examples have you seen that are working right now for SDR teams?
Yeah, so I think AI and SDR teams, it's obviously the hot topic at the moment, right? Won't it replace them? Will it augment their roles? Okay, so there's a few thoughts on this. My best guess, and I do think there's counterpoints to this, but my best guess of where things will be, let's call it 12 to 18 months from now, so nearish future, is that you will have your three tranches of outreach that are aligned to different deal sizes or different ACVs. So deal size 1 is your SMB market, very low deal size, quite simple sales cycle, high velocity. And I do think there's a potential that AI agents will automate an awful lot of this. Now, the counter to that, and I saw this admittedly unverified, so I saw this on LinkedIn from someone saying that they'd had privileged access to the output of a particular AI agent, and it had taken them something like 25,000 emails to get 3 meetings, or something ridiculous. Like it was 0.003%. And so that is going to burn your entire TAM unbelievably quickly if that is the truth, in which case I'd start to believe that AI agents won't take over that, any part of the go-to-market stack, right? But I also believe in the power of AI and how quickly it's going to continue to improve. So I do see a world where at some point in the future, very simple deal cycles, small ACVs are largely, if not completely, automated from an AI perspective. You've then got the middle tranche, which is your mid-market deals. So anything from, say, I don't know, 5K plus, where actually people do want to have a conversation with a rep. It's a little bit more complex sales cycle. And I think you will still then have an SDR team, but it might not be quite recognizable as an SDR from 6 months, 12 months ago. There'll probably be less people in that team. They'll be far more efficient in terms of their go-to-market, and they'll be more akin to a growth marketer than maybe a traditional SDR role. And what they will be doing is using a lot of tools and AI to augment their approach to go-to-market, so they can distribute a pretty large volume of messages across a number of different platforms, but do it incredibly efficiently and with the improvement of AI in a genuinely relevant and tailored way, at least if they're using the right tools, right? So it becomes a plus to those who are in that role. And the SDRs that will succeed in that role obviously need to be very tech literate. They need to be very curious. They need to be pretty analytical and quite creative in their approach to that role. And I think that's a really exciting future role for SDR teams that will work pretty well for the mid-market. And then you've got the third tranche, which is SDRs who are probably a lot more tenured, more senior, lots of industry experience, and they will be in the enterprise motion, right? Where you have to have actually quite a deep understanding of the solution you're selling and the problems that you're selling against. You need to be very consultative, and they'll be in a much more traditional SDR role, but way more consultative, and they will probably be in the one-to-one, one SDR to one AE type of ratio. They'll be able to take the prospect further down the sales cycle, so there's kind of less handovers, and that's kind of where I see the role evolving into those three tranches. I don't know whether that fully answers your question. Maybe we can dive a bit deeper into the AI element of it, but that's kind of how I see the team shaping up in the future.
Absolutely. It does answer my question. I think it's interesting. And I know we spoke about this on the webinar, because I think companies are going to struggle to justify the cost of having SDRs at the SMB market. It's almost got to be automated. Like, I just don't think, especially with the cost of tools and tech stack, I think it's an expensive play to run. But I think, like you said, where you think you're going to have tenured SDRs at the enterprise space, I'd love to dig in on how companies are going to be able to use AI to make that more effective. Because I think at the enterprise level, you've got to be multi-threading more, you've got to do more research, there's likely a much smaller TAM. So, it's a much more quality play than a quantity play. How do you think AI can help at the enterprise end of the market, particularly around research and account planning?
Yeah. So, I mean, you've kind of nailed it. In the research and account planning will be two areas that it can really improve the role of an SDR. So right now, if you are an SDR doing enterprise sales, you would need to, or you would have needed to, go and actually read the 10K of your enterprise prospect, right? So, that's the company filing that really talks about their position in the market, their key initiatives and strategies, right from the CEO down. Now, they can be pretty big filings, and it's not always obvious or easy to find the most pertinent and interesting information from that. So I think one very simple way to use AI is that people can upload that into ChatGPT and ask it, query the PDF and ask it to pull out the most interesting and insightful areas for them to land on when prospecting. And then there's a ton of other things that they can do in a similar vein, right? They can go and ask for their prospects' top 5 competitors. They can then go and research those using AI. They can pull a quick SWOT analysis. They can do the same in terms of generating battle cards for their business versus their competitors. So in many respects, they can start to build this incredibly bespoke sales enablement collateral around them through the use of AI, and even just using quite open tools like ChatGPT, they can get a lot of the way there. Now, I think the other thing that maybe people don't think enough about is using the AI as a bit of a foil to their approach, right? So saying, okay, now I have this information, what next? I'm planning to use it in this way. This is how I'm going to position things. And then what they should do is say, imagine you are this type of prospect. What would your response be? What would your hesitations be? So you can start to actually open up a dialogue and scenario plan, a role play, the potential approaches to this prospect. So that's another really interesting route that an enterprise SDR could use. Ultimately, the interesting thing is, like any new technology that enables greater efficiency and speed, though, the bar of quality goes up in an almost linear fashion. So you will be able to do a lot of these things a lot faster, but there will very quickly be an expectation from your prospects and from the market that you are incredibly well informed about their business and how you can help them. So yes, it will make the research more efficient, but potentially you will have to do more of it, and with an even better business plan or better proposition to that prospect.
Well, absolutely. There's no excuse for lazy prospecting anymore. There's no excuse for outreach with no research done, because one of the pieces of feedback I used to get from sales leaders all the time when we were training their teams was, I don't want my team to spend half an hour per account doing research, which, whether or not that's right or wrong is a different topic. But actually, they don't have that crutch to be behind anymore, because it doesn't have to take half an hour. And half an hour isn't very long in the grand scheme of things, but I still am on the receiving end of outreach with no research done. And to me, it's very easy to find one thing in 2 minutes, right? And so I hear what you're saying. So basically what you're saying is the competition is getting harder. It's taking more to stand out, just because it's so easy to use some of these tools to do thoughtful research, and to, back to your original 4 categories, is to make that really relevant.
Yes, agreed. The bar should go up as it stands. And you've just made this point, and obviously I'm on the receiving end of a lot of prospecting too. It's still almost universally terrible, right? There's it actually completely boggles my mind that I'm not on the receiving end of way better outreach at this point. Somewhat ironically, I've had outreach from at least a couple of organizations that are in the business of being AI agents, and there is no personalization or understanding or anything that has gone into that. So in theory, the bar should be raised. The reality that I'm seeing is that it still hasn't, which means if you're an SDR or an SDR leader listening to this, then you've got a huge amount of headroom to go and be best in class if you move quickly and utilize these things properly.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So if you were to put your CRO hat back on, which I know is a hat that you've worn multiple times, and you were building out a prospecting tech stack for a sales team, what would be your must-haves? What would be the areas that you would be focusing on and trying to streamline?
Yes. So I do have a CRO hat on still in my capacity here. So again, it depends on what stage of business you're at, right, in terms of how complex you want to be. But if I break it down into the real basics, you've got to have a reliable source of data. Right, so I'm going to kind of go through the work stream from left to right. So the first place I'd look at is, where am I getting my data from? Is it reliable? Is it high quality? Do they have what I need for the particular ICP that I'm targeting? And for that, different data sources might be more or less applicable. But I need a reliable, quality source of data. Now, you're ultimately going to, I'm sorry, just to be clear, I'm more or less discounting the fact you have a CRM already, right? Like I just won't mention that on a super base level. So get your data source. There needs to be a way to get that efficiently into the hands of your prospects. So some kind of sales engagement tool, I still think is a pretty essential requirement. Increasingly, an add-on to that, albeit I think they'll all start to offer this as a core proposition, is the ability to warm up multiple mailboxes because of the increase in sophistication of spam filters and therefore low deliverability rates. So either get a sales engagement tool that has it built in, or you'll probably need to have that as an additional cost. You would then, from my perspective, want to work with a tool like RevvedUp, which is, how do you take all that data and create great content that would be relevant and timely and insightful for those prospects, which can then go into your sales engagement tool and get delivered with high deliverability rates. And if you have a spare budget, and this is something that we'll be looking to do, I am still a fan of trying to get reps on the phone where possible. I would be looking at a parallel dialer in some capacity to help make that more efficient as well. Otherwise, you are 100% reliant on email and LinkedIn messages, which is a bit of a constraint to your team. I would say those are your key things, right? It's like, get your data source, make sure you've got a great tool for delivering your messages, and then make sure you've got a tool to help you create great content and great messaging. Those are your three core components. Added bonus if you can then call people efficiently. And then the final thing, and if I was talking about AEs, this would be a core component. It's slightly less so for SDRs. I would also want some sort of call recording software, call intelligence software, right? Like, absolutely essential. If your SDRs aren't dialing, or they're only getting a handful of connects a day that are a few minutes at a time, there's only so much you learn from a call recording on the SDR level, but it's absolutely essential when you're moving into the AE side of things.
Yeah. Well, what a tech stack. But I think the thing that stood out to me was, I think, the parallel dialer as well, because I think we just chatted with Sean over at Aircall, and he was talking about some of the things that they're doing and where they're seeing success with prospecting. But in absence of a dialer, I worry that reps would hide almost behind non-phone based outreach. And so I think if you have the data and you have access to mobile numbers and that data, give your team the best chance of success by giving them a dialer to do it that can track connect rates, the data, the leading indicators that I think are important. And then the final suggestion that you had was and then add a conversation intelligence tool on top of that, and then actually be able to hear not just what your reps are saying and be able to adjust that from a coaching perspective, but listen to what your prospects are saying, listen to feedback, listen to what messaging is resonating, what are their questions, what are their objections, and then you can use that again. It's a circle, right? Because then you can use that feedback to put into RevvedUp.ai, adjust your content again, and I think that becomes full circle. But I think that's a really solid tech stack, and I think hopefully, like you say, we are seeing some consolidation in the market, but I think hopefully you're going to see a lot of traction with your with your tool, which I can see is going to be, a phenomenal value add for go-to-market teams. And it's really great that you've been able to create something based on your own experiences.
Thanks, Shabri. Really appreciate that.
We just wanted to finish with one question, which we always like to ask our guests, and I'm sure, you mentioned that you're still on the receiving end of a lot of outreach, quality aside. But over the last few years, what has one piece of outreach that you've received? What's one that's really stood out to you, and why?
Oh, that's a good question. So let me answer it in two different ways. I don't know if this is exactly what you're looking for. The best SDR that I worked with was, I've worked with a number of great ones, right? But the one that still stands out in my mind is someone that I worked with at a test, and they were amazing again at creating resonant content and finding a very strong personal connection with people. It helped that they were incredibly smart and hardworking and all those foundational things as well. Now, interestingly, this was a number of years ago now, when actually personalization was less commoditized. And so they found an amazing way to use their background and their heritage to connect with people in a very personable way. That just drove a ridiculous connection rate and response rate, right? And then after that, they were very good at educating them, and they knew the product and the market inside out as well. So they found a way. I guess that the actual lesson from this is they found something that was a unique advantage to them that very few other people had, to make that connection. Right. So if you're thinking about how do I do this as an SDR, think about what is unique to me. And actually a good example for someone that I'll name is Tom Boston from Sales Loft. Right now, I love his stuff because it's really funny, it's really on point, and he leaned into his strengths. Right, he was an SDR. Now he's like a mini celebrity within the go-to-market community. How did he make that transition? He looked at what his strengths were, right? His strengths were funny observations and being on video and actually being quite unabashed about it. So I think the key thing is look for your unique strengths and lean into them. Don't try and do what everyone else does. And then the second way I would answer that is actually a very nice segue from Tom, which is the best. It's not quite outreach because they're not SDRs, but I think the most successful people in my attention at the moment, it's not from cold outreach. It is from creating value on LinkedIn and building personal brands, right? In particular on LinkedIn, but it could be also on podcasts. It could be through their reports that I'll find from searching through SEO and so on and so forth. But I think, and this is, I know, a little bit controversial to people, / not everyone agrees, maybe it's not controversial. I do think great SDRs should think about investing in their own brand reputation, right?
Yeah.
Post regularly on LinkedIn, build their own knowledge base, put value out into the world, not just with an eye on their next career move, right? Don't create loads of content about why they're such a good SDR. Create valuable content about the challenges that your product that you're representing solves in the industry and build some cachet there. And that will help you stand out significantly. So they're two thoughts, only because I personally haven't had any great outbound from anyone for a long time, sadly. So I just don't have anything to draw on.
That is a shame, and I'm hoping that's going to change, and you will be on the receiving end. I agree with you about Tom Boston. He's brilliant. We've had him on the podcast, and he's also, to your point, he recognises the importance of SDRs building that brand. So when we had him on the podcast, he was able to share how to get started. You know, lots of people have imposter syndrome around it. Lots of people are nervous about doing it. So he shared some really good tips with our listeners about how to get started on that. But he's brilliant. And as have you been. So thank you very much for joining us. If anyone wants to reach out to you to connect with you and learn more about RevvedUp, what's the best way to get in contact?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there and frequent it. So Mark Walker, and it's RevvedUp, REVVED, RevvedUp.ai. You should find me there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. Really appreciate it. It was great to have you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Shabri.
Thank you.